So welcome everyone. We are so thrilled about this teach-in and we're so thrilled to have you here. And I'll briefly review what we're gonna do today. But before we get started, I definitely wanna give you all an opportunity to get to know us if you don't already. So we'll get started with Jacqui. Please, Jacqui, introduce yourself and why you're so excited about being here today for this beautiful teach-in after the incredible sermon you gave.
Thank you, Anu. Hey, everybody. I'm Jacqui Lewis. If you're new to Middle Church or new to this community, I'm the senior minister. I celebrated my 17th anniversary at Middle a couple of weeks ago in January. And it is my life calling. It is my life vocation. Since Dr. King was killed, actually, I was almost 9 years old. And I really felt that I was supposed to be also a drum major for peace and do this anti-racist work to try to make a more just society. So Middle Church is a church of my dreams. Having a chance to have these conversations with folks like you feels like we're widening our network of revolutionary lovers. So I'm glad you came, and I hope you'll stay in touch with us at middlechurch.org. Follow me at Rev Jacqui Lewis and all the places, and keep learning together, going together, so we can make America great, loving, and just, maybe for the very first time. Glad you're here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jacqui. My name is Anu Gupta, and I'm also a member of Middle Church. And by training, I'm a lawyer, scientist, and an educator. And 7 years ago, with the assistance of the Middle Project, which is sponsoring this event, which is a secular nonprofit of the Middle Church, I was able to start my company called Be More with Anu. And what we do is really apply leading science-based and compassion-based tools to train people in breaking bias, particularly breaking racial bias. And the way the way I started this was through this container that we'll be talking about today. And the reason why we're all here today to celebrate Dr. King and his legacy on this King Day weekend. And I just want to start us off with one quote that Dr. King really shared that all of us, particularly at Middle, but all of us who's here, really kind of also align with, which is the quote around building a beloved community. And he basically, before he passed, says our goal is to build a beloved community. And this will require a qualitative shift in our hearts and a quantitative shift in our lives. So that's what we're going to talk about. What are these quantitative and qualitative shifts that all of us need to be making in our hearts and in our lives to really move towards that aspiration of a beloved community in our nation and in our world. So with that said, I know we still have people coming in, but wherever you are, we'll just start our teach-in. But before we start, I want to begin with a short meditation with you all, just to get you situated. You're coming from all over the country, Sunday morning, lots of things happening. So, wherever you are, come to a comfortable seated position. Maybe place both your feet on the ground below you. You can rest your hands on your lap or on your knees. You can relax your shoulders, relax your jaw. And if it's okay, if it's comfortable for you, bring your eyes to a gentle close. So we'll be doing this for about 5 minutes, just a short meditation reflection together. And then for the first few seconds, just return to your breath. If your eyes aren't closed, you can place your gaze at a stationary point in front of you. But the intention really here is that, we're kind of going within. Now just bring your attention to your breath. Notice the breath coming into the body. Notice the breath leaving the body. Breathing in, breathing out. Letting go of any tension, any preconceived notions, and really being present with this breath of yours, this breath of life, this breath that's been our longest living companion since the very moment we were born. Really savoring this breath. Now bring to mind an image of a person or a living being for whom you have unconditional love. perhaps a spouse, a child, a spiritual figure, even a pet, just one living being for whom you have unconditional love. And notice this living being in the window of your mind smile at you as you too smile back at them. And share with this living being the following well wishes. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you live with ease. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you live with ease. Just repeating these well wishes to this beloved being of yours a few more times. If the mind drifts away, that's okay. Notice what it's doing. And then return your awareness, your attention back to your beloved being. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you live with ease. And just notice this beloved being of yours really receive these well wishes from you. And really thank you for holding them in such high regard. As they slowly vanish from the window of your mind, now let's begin to expand this energy, this loving energy of well wishes to everyone who is here in this teaching with you. People you may know, people you may not know, people you may even dislike. It doesn't matter. Just notice and bring awareness to the same breath that they too have. And see if you can share these same well wishes with everyone here. May we be happy. May we be healthy. May we be safe. May we live with ease. May we be happy. May we be healthy. May we be safe. May we live with ease. Really feeling deeply within you these deep intentions and sharing these intentions, these well wishes with everyone who's taken these 2 hours away from across the nation, and see if this energy can really pervade the entirety of our nation. Now just expanding that energy to all living beings across our nation and our world. May all beings everywhere be happy and healthy. May all beings be safe. May we all live with ease. May we all be in peace. Just bringing your attention back to your breath, your longest living companion. And then if your eyes were closed, you can open them. If you'd like, you can shake out your shoulders, bring your chin to your chest, stretching the back of your neck. And welcome back. So that was just a 5-minute meditation on cultivation of empathy, of radical empathy, also known as revolutionary love or loving kindness. And we wanted to begin today with this meditation and this intention because of what we shared just now. Our goal is to build a beloved community, and this will require a qualitative shift in our hearts. and a quantitative shift in our lives. And this is just a taste of what that feels like, really moving away from our heads, moving it down to our hearts. And this is something, this particular meditation that we did has been shown to tremendously reduce fear, lack of distrust, and also bias. So there's a whole center at Stanford Medical School that studies compassion, not as a emotion or something we're born with, but as a skill that we can build. And these are some of the skills we'll be talking about today that we all need to build in order to undo this caste system that we find ourselves in. So with that said, let me just give you a quick overview of what our time today is going to be like. So I'll start off with my teaching, where I'm really going to talk about caste from the lens of social sciences. And then I'll pass it over to Jacqui, where she's going to talk about how caste was interpreted into Christianity. And both of these conversations are really important for all of us, whether we're Christian or not, whether we're religious, atheist, Buddhist, Muslim, it doesn't matter. All of us are in this caste system, and we're seeing the results of that. Then after that, Jacqui and I are just going to have a conversation about these two different interpretations and ways the caste system has come about. And we'll also take your questions. So throughout, the teach-in portion of our time together, please, if you have any questions, feel free to really write them down, because we will be taking questions. We want to make sure that we get to your questions. And then, both Jacqui and I will share some next steps. Where do we go from here? Hopefully this teach-in doesn't end at 3 p.m., but it's a continuous journey for us to really undo our caste system. So without further ado, let's get started. So I'm going to really talk about caste from the lens of social sciences. So as I shared with you, I'm a lawyer and a scientist, and basically, to give you some context, I've been fascinated with this idea of bias in particular since I was very young, since I immigrated to this country. I moved to the US when I was 10 years old. My family is Indian. And suddenly coming here, I found myself in a completely new setting, but also in a way that I was othered. I lived in India and my family came from the dominant caste, right? So we were of upper caste there. Coming to America, I was suddenly the other. I was suddenly someone to be despised, someone to be made fun of. And for me, of course, as a human being, that hurt a lot. But as also someone who was really interested in human behavior and human mind, and as a scientist, I was like, what is going on here? Why is this happening? Why is it so pervasive? And I'll share with you a little bit more about what the sciences have really found about this. Like where does this caste system, what we call race today, comes from? And what is the difference between caste and race, and also class? So, but before we move into this, I want to really share a story, which I think all of you will really appreciate. With Dr. King, since this is why we're here to celebrate his legacy today. And for many of you, I think many of you were probably not around. I certainly wasn't around in the 50s and the 60s, but I certainly grew up with the stories of Dr. King, his writings and his videos that have really inspired me to do the work that I'm doing. And in the 50s, there was the Montgomery bus boycott, right? All of us know about Rosa Parks and how she was kind of one of the leading figures in desegregating buses, which really eventually led to the fall of Jim Crow. But in that time, Dr. King was one of the leaders there, and there was an assassination attempt, right? So there was a person in Harlem who basically stabbed him right above the heart in 1958, which almost killed him because she missed his heart by probably like an inch. So after Dr. King was recovering, he, as someone who was a student of nonviolence, a student of revolutionary love, he wanted to go on a pilgrimage to India. And he did in 1959 with his wife, Coretta Scott King. They went to India. And of course, they were basically VIPs in the country of India, wining and dining with the prime ministers. They spent a whole month across India. And he had long dreamed of going to India because he saw his fight for freedom of African Americans, of Black Americans, very connected to the Indian independence movement, which itself was also a movement against racism around this global caste system. Your colonization in India was about the inferiority of Indians to be able to rule themselves. So he was inspired by that, and that nonviolent struggle of nonviolence resistance was really coming from everything that he'd learned about nonviolence resistance from the Indian independence movement. And he wanted to go to the land of Gandhi. And he also wanted to really learn more about the so-called untouchables, the lowest caste in the ancient Indian caste system. And he had read a lot about them, and he had sympathy for them, but he didn't really know very much about them. So once he got to India, he'd be in Delhi, he'd be in Bombay, he'd be filled with garlands, and people are like adoring him. And they were also very, very interested in what he was doing in the US. And they were following everything he did. And then he was invited to go to a school in the southern tip of India, which was basically a school of untouchable students. They're known as Dalits, or and Dalits really means broken people. And the teacher, the principal of the school, invited Dr. King in, and he introduced him to the students. And he said, young people, I would like to present to you a fellow untouchable from the United States of America. As the principal said that, King was floored. He had not, he didn't expect this term untouchability to be applied to him. He had flown in from another continent. He had dined with the prime minister. He didn't see a connection with this ancient Indian caste system to be applied to him. He's written in his own writings that initially he was shocked and even peeved, offended that he would be referred to as an untouchable. But then he started thinking about the reality of African Americans in the US. And here's what he wrote. I started thinking about the fact 20 million of my brothers and sisters were smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in an affluent society. I started thinking about the fact these 20 million brothers and sisters were by and large living in house-infested, unendurable slums in the big cities of our nation, still attending inadequate schools faced with improper recreational facilities. And I said to myself, yes, I am an untouchable. And every Negro in the United States of America is an untouchable. So this is really where our story begins, because Dr. King, who really was a preeminent leader, saw race in America as a caste system. And this story is very similar to my own story as I was beginning to share with you. As I was, really passionate about this idea of bias, particularly being called Osama bin Laden, being called strange by strangers on the train, and just always feeling like people wanted to share with me all the things they knew about India, their trips to India, their favorite types of curry, without really wanting to get to know me, the human being, Anu, right? There's so many other things I bring to the table other than my skin color and my cultural background. So this is where this is why I went to law school, wanting to really deepen my understanding. And in law school, one of the first experiences I had was actually attend a sentencing hearing for young people in New Orleans. And basically I saw a defendant box filled with young Black teenagers, children between the ages of 13 and 15, who were being sentenced to go to prison for petty, petty offenses, breaking cell phones, trespass to property, going to prison and for 2 to 5 years at a time for such petty things. And I was gasping so hard that the guard had to ask me to leave for disturbing the peace of the court. But I couldn't understand at that moment the cruelty in our system. We can talk about injustice, we can talk about disparities. I couldn't understand the cruelty. And that's what really got me started on this journey of wanting to understand the nature of racial bias and breaking it. Because this cruelty lives not in our heads, but in our hearts.
Anu, So
Yeah.
powerful. I'm so sorry to interrupt you 1 second. We're having a lot of people saying it's hard to hear. I don't know if you could get any closer to the microphone.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
That's okay. And now that we've addressed it, folks, I would just ask that remember that this will be recorded. So if you're having a
Sure.
hard time hearing anything, you'll get it all back. And let's just focus on this amazing teaching. Sorry, Anu. I hope I didn't
No
throw you
worries.
off.
No worries. No worries. No worries. I hope this is better. I'll just project higher. And thank you for letting me know. So that's basically one of the reasons why we need to talk about this idea of radical empathy. And one of the things that was really happening for me in the background as I was seeing this in the courtroom, but also as a scientist, as I was studying the nature of racial disparities across um, education to healthcare to criminal justice to housing, it was like, well, race as a word is insufficient. It's inaccurate because it just says we're different people. And basically, it's a social construct and we're different people. But there's no biological or genetic basis for this. So why is this happening? And that's when I really saw that from the country that I had come from, there's this idea of caste. And this is how we define caste. Caste is an artificial, arbitrary hierarchy of graded ranking of human value in society. That's what caste is. It's a social construction that determines one's standing, respect, benefit of the doubt, access or control to resources, ability to do or not do certain things in a society through no fault of their own or any actions they've taken. I certainly know this to be true of the Indian caste system, right? This is what happens to people who are not from the dominant caste, who are untouchables, who are Dalits. No fault of their own. They're kind of placed in a fixed place in society. And this is what we begin to see in our country for African Americans across the board and other people of color as well, for anyone who doesn't meet that dominant caste status. And I'll give you just two examples here because we'll go back to the slide in a second. But I don't know if you remember the incident of the bird watcher at Central Park. Basically, it was a person of who is Black who was watching, just birds, and there was a woman there of a dominant caste of a white woman who basically threatened to call the police on him and say that there's a Black man bothering me. Now, this person is a Harvard graduate. He is, a board member of the Audubon Society, and yet, in that instant, because of the way he looks, because of his caste, he could be discarded in such a way. And this is where I want to kind of teach you all and really think about the difference between race and caste. The other example I'll give here is really examples of Beyonce and Serena Williams. I think all of you know, I hope you know who they are. Well, Serena Williams is kind of the top athlete when it comes to tennis in our country and the world even. And Beyonce is kind of the goddess of entertainment. Both of these women who happen to be Black, right, on this caste system, almost died giving birth to their kids because there were some complications with their pregnancy and they were telling the healthcare workers, hey, this is happening. And the healthcare workers didn't believe them. They said they were exaggerating until they had to take their health into their own hands and seek help. And this happens to Black women at rates 4 times than white women or any other group of people. So this is, again, we're talking about what is this? This is not just racism. This is not just race because, these are some of the most accomplished people in our country. Race is insufficient. It's inaccurate. So what race is a metric. So I want you to think about this. It's a metric. It's a way. It's a symbol. It's a signal that ranks human beings in a caste system in America. So in our country, the caste system, the social construction that we call race is actually a metric. What's happening beneath it is really this graded ranking of human value in our society. And that's really important to understand this distinction. And this metric can be skin color, physical appearance, geographic ancestry, religious beliefs, right? So of course I'm implicated in it, and all of you, regardless of your background, whether you're Asian, whether you're Latinx, whether you're Native American, whether you're mixed race, whether you're Muslim, whether you're Buddhist, whether you're Middle Eastern, whether you're Jewish, we're implicated in this graded ranking of human value. Now, look at these images again through the lens of caste. Look what happened just 2 weeks ago, storming of the Capitol. There's a man who could just walk into Speaker Pelosi's, office and sit the way he did. I mean, we saw all sorts of incredibly egregious things happen that day. Whereas this woman who was basically protesting for the dignity of the lives of other human beings, to have an equal education, to not be stopped and frisked by the police, to have equal opportunity to employment, to have access to good housing, as Dr. King talked about 60 years ago, how she and many, many of her, allies of all colors were brutalized by the same system. It doesn't matter how educated they were. It doesn't matter how much money they had. This is caste in action. And then one of the things that gets oftentimes mixed in with this conversation is class. People are like, well, Barack Obama was the president. Oprah Winfrey is a billionaire. Yes, and they too can be easily minimized and trivialized because of this caste system. So what class is basically is attributes such as education, such as wealth, diction, accent, clothing, that can be changed through personal actions, right? So this is what class is. Unlike caste and race, this is something that we can change. And yet, even if we change it, like 2 weeks ago at the Arlo Hotel in New York City, in Soho, the son of a jazz musician can be accused of stealing someone's phone because of his caste. This is not class, right? So this is, again, Dylan Roof, of a very, very low class position, could go into a Christian congregation and kill, massacre 9 innocent people, yet be treated by the law enforcement with dignity, going to Burger King to feed him. One of the worst massacres we've seen in the 21st century. This is caste in action, regardless of class. So this is basically the takeaway, really. Caste is this artificial, arbitrary hierarchy of graded ranking of human value. And race in our country is the metric. It's the metric, it's the symbol, it's the signal of this caste system. And basically the way that caste system works is the dominant caste, people of European ancestry who appear European, who appear white, are on top. And people who are Black or who appear Black or have Black ancestry are at the bottom. It's just bipolar. And there's so many other people that are kind of squeezed in the middle. People like me, Asian Americans, Latinx, even indigenous people, mixed race people. We're kind of straddling this caste system from the dominant and the subordinate, wanting to be oftentimes as close as possible to the white caste, the dominant caste, and as far away as possible from the subordinate caste, because of the way all of us have been conditioned, because of the way all of the messaging we've received around what it means to be white, to be beautiful, to be better than, and what it means to be Black. And this is where I want to basically come to an end for my teaching, but really, again, honing in the point, and this is what Isabel Wilkerson really beautifully lists in her book and crystallizes as a story in her book, is caste is the bones. It is the structure, it's the infrastructure. And race, this thing, this metric, is the skin. These are things we cannot change. We cannot change this about ourselves. But class is the clothes, the education, the addiction, things we can change. These are things we can change, right? So if you can act your way out of it, it's class. But if you can't act your way out of it, it's caste. So what's needed to undo America's caste system? Briefly want to just talk about that. As a lawyer, we know We've been litigating, lawyers have been litigating, we've had so many strategies. That's how basically we just desegregated our country. We lobbied. There was a whole strategy starting in the 1910s until the 1950s that people had adopted to use the law as an instrument to desegregate, to end racism in America. And we did that. Yet since 1965, when the Civil Rights Act was passed, the level of racial disparities in our country haven't improved, actually have worsened. There are more African-American men in prison today than there were enslaved in 1863. So despite changing the laws, despite having diversity and inclusion and equity programs and anti-racism trainings, we are where we were in 1965. And as a lawyer, I will tell you this is why I left my legal practice, because I cared about racial justice, racial equity, ending disparities, but the law is an insufficient tool to do it, because the people who are enforcing the law have yet to change their hearts and minds about this caste system. So we are not going to think our way out of this caste system. There have been hundreds and hundreds and thousands of studies that have been done talking about the disparities, yet where's the action? We have some of the smartest people in our country, where's the action? What we need to do, go back to Dr. King, qualitative and quantitative shifts in our hearts and in our lives. So for me, what brought me to this work was really, we need to know our history. That's where we start. We need to reckon with why we are where we are, knowledge of it, and then not forget it, be mindful. Mindfulness, we started with a tool, is one of the tools that has helped us really understand how we can build new habits. And this is where unconscious bias, unconscious racial bias is really important. Mindfulness is those tools to begin to really break down these unconscious biases. And radical empathy, revolutionary love. We have to begin to be in the shoes of the other people. Not pretend what it's like to be in their shoes, but do the hard work to look from their perspective what it may be like to be someone who comes from a family who was stopped and frisked, or who was stopped and frisked him or herself, who was brutalized by the police with tear gas, who was, for no reason was accused of crimes. This is radical empathy, as are human siblings. And the wonderful thing that Isabel Wilkerson showed in her book, which if you haven't read, I would highly, highly recommend you read, that could be one of your next steps after this teach-in, is the same thing. Knowledge of our history. We need to understand how we got here. And she akins our country to an old house. Old houses are beautiful, but they always need work. But if we continue to ignore that leaky ceiling or the flooded basement, it's going to come to haunt us. That's what's happened. January 6th, first time in US history, a man with a Confederate flag inside the Capitol building. We have yet to reckon with our history. We can't deny it any longer. And then ways to change, hearts and minds, mindfulness and radical empathy. So I'll end here, and what all of these things really give us is this idea of love, which Jacqui will so beautifully talk about, revolutionary love. And Dr. King said, love is the greatest force in the universe. It is the heartbeat of the moral cosmos. He who is a participant in the being of God. And he said, power without love is reckless and abusive. And love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. This is what we need to do today. So as we move forward, for the remainder of our teach-in, and even after this teach-in, I'd love for you to think about your own life and think about ways caste and class have come to play a role in your life. Particularly this, if you can act your way out of it, it's class. If you can't act your way out of it, it's caste. All of us are implicated, dominant caste, middle caste, outcast. or subordinate caste. So with that said, I'll pass it on to Jacqui, and then we'll have a conversation about this, and of course, invite you all to be participants. Thank you.
Thank you, Anu. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. In part 2 of our teach-in, I'm going to be talking about interpreting caste into Christian scripture, or I might say, how Christian scripture conscribes us to caste, because in fact it has, and it does. I'm going to talk a bit about one of the stories that is so fundamental to racial hierarchy and caste, not only in America, but around the globe. And even people who don't know the Bible think they know this story, and they think they know what it means about brown people. Listen now for a word from Genesis 9. And this is the story of Noah and his sons after the flood. I think most of us know that God wasn't happy with the way God's folks were behaving and sent a rain to start the world over, assigned Noah to build an ark, to put animals 2 by 2 in the ark, is the way this story goes. And I'm saying story, guys, because that is a myth to make meaning, not a historical fact. But in this story that is meant to give us a kind of ethical and theological teaching, the next section of it is about Noah and his sons. Listen to this. It's found in Genesis 9 for the curious, verses 18 and forward. The sons of Noah who went out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham was the father of Canaan. These 3 sons were the sons of Noah, and from these the whole earth was peopled. Let me just pause there to say this story is a story to get to the etymology of humankind, right? Adam, Eve, humankind grows, Noah saves humanity from the flood, takes some folks with him in the ark, including his sons. They come out and they people the earth. Noah, and let me say Japheth is often spoken of as European, or let's say Euro-Asian. Shem is spoken of as Semitic, so that would be Muslim and Jewish, the Semites, if you will. And Canaan is spoken of as being African or Afro-Asiatic. You might hear me say Jesus is Afro-Asian. So European, Japheth, or Euro-Asian, Shem, Semitic, and Canaan, Afro-Semitic or African. Back to the text. Noah, a man of the soil, was the first to plant a vineyard. He drank some of the wine and became drunk, and he lay uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his 2 brothers outside, "Daddy ain't got no clothes on." I'm paraphrasing. Then Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both their shoulders, and walked backward and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned away, and they did not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine and knew that his youngest son had done to him, he said, "Cursed be Canaan. Lowest of slaves shall he be to his brothers." He also said, "Blessed by the Lord my God be Shem, and let Canaan be his slave. May God make space for Japheth, and let him live in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his slave." After the flood, Noah lived 350 years. All the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. Now, let me just do a little biblical hermeneutic real quick for you. Not anybody who reads this story actually believes, that Noah lived to be 350 years and in total 950 years before he died. They'll start telling themselves something about how years must have meant, like less days. There was a different way to count time. They sort of rationally, logically try to tell themselves how that can be true, but isn't true in our understanding. Yet many of those same people will cling to this story that is meant to be, to tell us something about the origins of humanity. Was there a rain? Possibly. Could there have been the building of an ark that would withstand a big rain from God? Not likely. Was Noah and his children able to find two of every type of animal, male and female, and get them on the ark? Highly unlikely. But the story says something about God's love of God's people. This is pre-covenant, this is pre-Abraham, this is pre-God kind of saying God's name to God's people, a kind of foreshadowing of God being in relationship with this agrarian culture, God having a relationship with them, they're having a relationship with God, and that God both was angry enough to rain out the world, but also benevolent enough to save it, if that makes sense. And the sort of big message in the text is God does this big rain tantrum storm and then promises never to do it again. And we've all heard maybe the story of why the rainbow was a promise of never doing it again. But let's get back to Japheth and Ham and Shem and Canaan and Noah and these sons. And did they have wives? And who were they peopling with? I mean, there's a couple of holes in the story. But the takeaway for many people who want to traffic in caste is that Ham saw his father's nakedness, which, by the way, in ancient culture, it's not nice to see your father's nakedness. It's not nice to see your mother's nakedness, but and it's a dishonor to see the nakedness. It's a dishonor to be covered, to be uncovered, and it's a dishonor to view it, to not turn your face away. But this cursing of Ham through his son Canaan, the etymology of this story and the purpose it serves is to set up that Canaan is subordinate to Shem. Canaan is subordinate to Shem because Canaan is subordinate to Israel. This story sets up God, quote, choosing God's people to have a land full of milk and honey, and the land full of milk and honey belongs to Canaan, and the God who chooses these people gets to tell them to go destroy Canaan so they can have it. So you need an origin story. You need a story that subordinates these people, that makes them less human, that makes them less loved of God, in order for that to work out. In other talks, I've called this the problem of chosenness, because truly, friends, not to shock you with this, but theology is the work of humankind, right? Theology is the work of divine encounter being interpreted by humankind. Human beings across time trying to figure out the mystery. Why is there life? Why is there death? Why does the sun move? Why do the plants grow? Why don't they grow? Where did the fire come from? You know, why do some of us have children and some of us not have children? What is the relationship between me and the stars and the turning of time? Throughout time, humans have worked hard to understand the relationship to a holy other. And once this people, any people, decides that God is more on their side than the side of others, I'm just going to tell you, professional theologian that I am, that is a human construct and is actually in contradiction to many texts in the Bible in which out of the mouth of God is spoken, all of these people are my people. I will be their God and I will be their people. So this is to say that this story of a child who looks upon his father's members and doesn't cover them and mocks him in front of his brothers, that turns into a curse for the grandchild, mind you, Canaan, is designed to justify Israel's relationship to her neighbors. Israel's worldview is that they're chosen. Israel's worldview is even though God repeatedly allows them to be defeated in battle, God actually prefers them. And God will use their suffering to redeem the world because in the end, God will save Israel and restore Israel to her greatness. And all of this is the narrative of a people working to understand their relationship to their God. Now, here's the special part. The special part is because Canaan is perceived to be Southern African, Afro-Asian, and Japheth is perceived to be West and Europe. You can see where I'm going. The European nice white people are from Japheth's line. The Semites, the Israelites, the Muslims, the descendants of Abraham through Isaac and Jacob, and also through oh my God, my mind just went dead. Also through the woman that Abraham takes to make another baby, that leads us to Islam and Judaism. Those people are blessed, and the ones who come from Ham are cursed. And in this nation, the brown ones, the dark ones, the African ones are seen as subordinate because their color, their skin tone is a mark, is a designation. You can't miss them, is the way the story goes. What is kind of shocking and sad to me is that not only does this play out in Christian life in the United States, but in Rwanda, the story of Ham led to the division of the Tutsi and the Hutsi. The Europeans who took their understanding of caste with them to Africa began to look at the physiognomy of these people who were the same people, friends, and to see some difference that they would ascribe to the curse. And that curse, that when the Germans and the Belgian colonists came in contact with the Hutu and the Tutsi, they believed they were different races. They reinforced that they were different races, and they taught them to measure nose width and skin tone and decide who had the right to live and who had the right to die. This racism, this caste, was exported around the globe and into art, which you can see here. Painter Modesto Brocos in Brazil makes a painting called Ham's Redemption, in which a dark woman is delighted that her child's child is whiter, and therefore redeems the family, enlightens the race. Can you see my face? This is a phenomenon that happened in Reconstruction in places like Washington, D.C., where families were encouraged to have their smartest child marry the lightest person they could to, quote, lighten up the race. This is just one example of how the biblical texts are used to justify human hatred. Yes, the root of colorism. So what do we do with that? Well, I think we have to understand first, we have to read all of the holy texts that we encounter through a lens of WWGW. And what I mean by that is, what would God want? Can we really imagine that there is a mean, caste-driven, holy other who prefers some of us over others, who designs the universe so that some people are hungry and thirsty and set outside and set apart, unable to thrive and live and be whole and well? I'll tell you, as a professional God worker, I could never work for a deity that would have these kinds of characteristics. What I'm saying, friends, is we have to understand psychologically that because we don't know who God is, because we don't know what the holy mystery is, we are often projecting what we think, what we believe onto a deity, and then praying to that deity and making sacrifices to that deity, building totems about that deity. In other words, we build God in our own image. Psychodynamically, I'm thinking this is a place where we need to have a critique of anything that puts hatred, derision, violence, murder in the mouth of God, because God is love. God is love. And everyone who lives in love lives in God, and God lives in them. I'm talking about a fierce revolution of love that helps us strip down to a simple place, a theological understanding, an ethical understanding, a philosophical understanding. Atheists, agnostics can have a philosophical understanding that the universe is wired for us to love one another. And so my solution to this is to really make it plain and make it simple. That fierce revolutionary love is the kind of ethical imperative we can ascribe to love without walking through creeds, without taking vows, without giving up our firstborn child. We can hack tribalism through this kind of love that each and every one of the world's religions describes in some way or another. It might be love your neighbor as yourself. It might be don't do to someone that you don't want to have done to you. But from Christianity to Islam, to Sikhism, to Buddhism, to Zoroastrianism, to religions I can't name and don't know much about, a core message is to love your neighbor as yourself. And I think the reason that that's true is because we all come from the cradle of civilization. We all come from Mother Africa. And in African cultures, this kind of core ethic of Ubuntu, this core organizing principle of Ubuntu is I am who I am because you are who you are. I am who I am because you are who you are. The way Dr. King called that was that we were inextricably connected or woven together in a big garment of destiny. He said it sometimes. But this idea that we complete each other. We walked out of the water, we walked into the cave, we came out into the light, understanding that we were not going to thrive or survive unless we did it together. So fierce revolutionary love hacks tribalism. I like that way. I like the way Anu talks about hacking bias. So it hacks tribalism to claim that we are inextricably and irrevocably connected to each other. That the freedom, the thriving, and the destiny of people and planet are tied up together. We know this to be true. In times of stress, we know this to be true. When our base of brain is in operation to help us survive, we find someone to cling to. We shelter together. We put wood up around the windows so our houses won't blow down. We get bags of sand to protect ourselves from the storm. We feed our neighbors' children when they're hungry. We don't walk by and see suffering people in the street and leave them there. We are wired to survive as individuals. And we are hardwired to survive as a clan. We're wired to circle up our wagons with our own kind and stick together so we can make it. And what I'm suggesting is revolutionary love, fierce revolutionary love can't undo what's wired in us, but it widens our circle of who our people are. We come to understand that my clan includes everybody. My clan includes Anu's parents. My clan includes the Chinese girl in a Buddhist orphanage who will never know who God is, but she's my people. My clan even includes those people that are angry and desperate and violently trying to overturn this election. They are my people too. And so I'm required, if I think about my survival as tied up with theirs, not to say that all of those violent acts are right, they're not, but to try to understand, to try to have empathy, to try to have a way to relate to the suffering and the pain so that together we can find solutions to free all of us. I love the way Ruby Sales says, sometimes white people don't think white people can be redeemed. I want us to have an imagination that the global family is our family. And that when a child in India doesn't have clean water, I'm thirsty. That's radical empathy. When a grandmother in Mexico doesn't have bread, I'm hungry. That's radical empathy. My wealth, my well-being, my health, I can't be well when someone is destitute if I think of them as my kin. And this is a place where Christian scriptures really speak to me. Judeo-Christian scriptures in Isaiah 58. What do you think God wants from you? The prophet says. What kind of worship, what kind of fasts, what kind of rituals do you think God wants? God wants you to feed the people around you. God wants you to clothe the naked around you. God wants you to say yes to your kin. And I'm saying, we are all kin. Now, how do we get here? Well, first of all, I don't believe that we are able to love other people if we don't love ourselves. Just period. Just how, what? We have no vocabulary. We have no experience of love if we don't love ourselves. We are our first love object. In utero, babies understand how to put their thumb in their mouth to self-soothe. We are our first love object. In a spiritual way, I say our bodies hold the divine. To not love ourselves is to mock any holy other we believe exists in the world, is to disregard, to blaspheme even the universe that we're creating love in us, light in us, making us who we are. And loving ourselves is not easy in a culture that calls that narcissism, or in a culture that tells us we're not good, we're not beautiful, we're not strong, we're not right unless we're white and male and straight. So I think it's a lifelong spiritual practice. I'm working on a book and I've got 3 practices in the love yourself section. And one of them, to be honest with you, is to be honest, to tell the truth. Like, to love yourself isn't to say, I was really horrible yesterday and I'm good with it. You know, but to love yourself is to cultivate candor and honesty with yourself. To look at yourself in a mirror and see who you really are. To learn to love you're in progress. To learn to love you make mistakes. To learn to love when you're shiny and fabulous and wonderful. Who are you to say you're not? Says Marianne Williamson and Desmond Tutu, depending on who you ask. This loving ourselves as a spiritual practice, that every day, I'm talking flossing your teeth, I'm talking brushing before you go to bed, when you meditate, when you pray, to give thanks to the universe, to love for you. You are your best thing. To quote Alice Walker, you are your best thing. And so it all starts there. To find a way to forgive yourself for the mistakes you make, to stand up and give yourself grace and start over, to watch yourself change and grow, to give yourself space to be transformed. Loving yourself is the first place, unconditionally, that this whole revolutionary love thing starts. The second practice in the book I'm writing, called Fierce Love, is about loving your posse wildly. There is something about growing our love muscle when we're ridiculously, obscenely generous and loving with the people around us. like make wild love is what I'm trying to say. And I don't mean the sex part, though you can do that too. But I mean to reach out to the one who's not speaking to you. I mean to imagine the gifts you have to give someone before they ask. I mean, showing up. You know what that's like for you when someone says, I saw you did a thing and I dropped in to see it, or write a note for God's sake. Remember notes? There's something really powerful about what happens to us psychologically and physically when we love someone else. Our heartbeat changes, endorphins flow. There's something calm and rich that grows between us. The more you love, the more you feel love. And so the second step is to love your posse wildly. And who's your posse? Well, Jesus said, the one you think is despised is your posse. That would be the Samaritan. The one outside is your posse. Remember that we're trying to stretch the people that we call kin. Loving your posse wildly means loving the ones that are close to you and the ones that are not so easy to understand. Even the stranger. The rabbis say when you love a stranger, if their cow wanders in your yard, you feed the cow and water the cow until the neighbor comes home. Till your enemy comes home, you feed their cow till your enemy comes home. How do you translate that to today? Gosh, we're called to love those people that are being mean to us on Twitter. Oh my God, I hate that. But it's true. And the third thing in this is to love the world justly. I mean, you're going to buy my book and you're going to get deeper in this, but this idea of an everyday justice is what I'm talking about. Not I'm called to ministry and I must go to marches. I mean, I'm going to do that. But like an everyday choice that you can make for justice is about like, how am I going to spend my money today? Where am I going to shop? Sustainably, not always big box, maybe spending some money in my local neighborhood, maybe buying Black. How you spend your money, what you consume with your heart, I think is a question of justice. What do I watch? What do I listen to? What do I expose myself to? What do I traffic in? What do I recirculate? That's an everyday justice decision. How will I invest my funds to the ACLU or to the United Negro College Fund or your own college or your own faith community? But that's an everyday act of justice. Whether I will hold a grudge or let it go. That's the kind of thing I mean by everyday living justly. And I do believe that justice and love are twins. And so we're making everyday small choices to live justly. We are also growing our love muscle. And we're making a love revolution possible. I want to say at least 2 sentences on the idea that we're not only inextricably connected to each other, but we're also connected to the planet, to the earth. So how do we, consume plastics and, right? Paper, and what do we print? And how do we reduce our carbon footprint? How do we live as though Mother Earth is our womb and that we need her in order to live? Those are questions I want us to think about as we think about fierce love that will hack tribalism, that starts with our own love of ourselves, an appreciation of ourselves, the beauty of ourselves, grace toward ourselves, that moves out to loving our posse wildly, not just mama and daddy and brother and sister, but our enemies are our posse. Yes, they are. To love wildly and extravagantly and grace-filled love. And then finally, to make everyday choices for justice. How we behave, how we spend our time, how we spend our money, the choices we make that lead to just society. Now I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Jacqui. That was so powerful. So I think I'd love to just kind of begin a discussion with you and also then invite all of you who are here to just reflect on what both of us have shared and to share with them questions that we can get to, because we're basically teaching and learning together in this, right? And there are no bad questions, there are no wrong questions. I believe if you're thinking it, someone else is also thinking it. So our hope is to really begin to offer clarity so we can move towards this beautiful pathway that Jacqui has outlined around loving yourself, loving your posse, and loving the world. But to start us off, Jacqui, I have a question for you, because one of the things that you said, the first aspect of this path is love yourself, right? Love yourself.
Yes.
And you connected that idea with truthfulness. Truthfulness.
Yes.
So I'd love for you to talk about that, because when it comes to this America's racial caste system, this caste system where race is the metric, truth is like absent.
Elusive.
Elusive. It's and so I'm like curious, how can people love themselves when they believe in a false god, in a false in falsity, in lies? And how do we individually, at least all of us here who are committed not just to loving the world but loving ourselves, can really deepen into loving ourselves and truth?
Yeah, I knew that's such a good question. That's such a good question. Yeah. People are asking about gender. I think it's the hardest thing in the practices that I'm talking about, and I think it's the most essential. And here's what I mean, Anu. We are born into families and born into cultural settings and born into the world that we didn't pick. And so much of that is so hardwired, a kind of politeness is the way we want to move. We don't want to really tell each other, "You hurt me. I'm disappointed in you. You failed. I'm mad. I'm sad." And little kids, little children are taught nice means this kind of polite speak that isn't true. So too often, let's just layer in gender for now because someone asked us to. You know,
Yeah, I'd love to hear something about that too.
a girl child.
Right,
You are told, you are taught, it is modeled to you the
right,
way you get what you want in the world, the way you move in the world with success is to kind of go around people, to
right.
kind of direct, to kind of be sideways, and that's rewarded. What's not rewarded is straight talk, right? What's not rewarded is take no BS, to use an expression. And so
Well,
that little girl learns, I've got to manipulate a little bit what's around me in order to survive. And that becomes just a part of her personality.
right,
And the male child often is said, say the thing, be honest, be straight. And when they both grow up, they're going to get in workplaces, and the boy child is going to be rewarded for being direct at that point, right? So I'm just going to say it's hard then to, when you're young and vulnerable and you don't live on your own and you need your folks, your posse to survive, to develop a kind of radical truth telling.
yeah,
But I do think, Anu, it's worth lifting up as an aim, as a goal.
exactly.
Like I'm 61 now. And I
Wow.
think, yeah, I can't believe I just said that. But I remember when I was 30, Anu, and it wasn't that long ago, right?
Yeah,
Feels like it was yesterday. When I was 30, I was like, swallow your voice. Don't say that. Here's
right.
that. You've got to sell this thing to the customer, blah, 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 blah. At 60, I can't abide it. I cannot abide biting my tongue. The Spanish, some of my Latin friends say, no tengo un pela en la boca. Like
Right.
I'm going to say it. But
Yeah,
what if I had the blessing of that at 30, right? What if
yeah,
I did 22? So if we could teach our children anew, and this is the kind of where the book really goes, what if we taught our children how much we would value them if they were honest?
yeah,
Your 2-year-old can't bear the spaghetti. Let her
right.
truth about it. Your 8-year-old
Exactly.
son can't bear playing football because he'd rather play with dolls. What
Exactly.
if we liberated our people to be honest sooner. What do you think about that?
I think that is exactly how we're going to build this beloved community. We have to just do away with all the pretense. There is a higher intelligence in us that you call God, many of us call something else, but we know in our bodies there's intuition that's telling us who we need to be, who we want to be. And that's so true for me, right? All my life I was just trying to be someone other than who I really wanted to be. Right. It took me so long to actually, the funniest thing for me is that it was when I first started attending Middle Church, 11 years ago, that Jesus pulled me out of the closet.
Yes, Jesus.
And I was listening to Jesus every week and this idea of revolutionary love. And it was like, oh, wow, like I can truly love myself because this is how I'm made. And this is actually not about being proud. And I want to talk about that idea in a second. This is actually about honor.
Yes, it is. That's
This
good.
body, this embodiment of the divine, of the sacred, is being reflected, in this manifestation. And I'm honored about it. And
Yes.
that's what, I think for me, loving myself unconditionally means
Yes.
is to give myself the benefit of the doubt, to give myself a second chance, to forgive myself for all the mistakes I've made, and then to hold myself accountable.
Yep. That's right.
To do in the 12 steps, basically, but in a way that's kind of, again, embodying that spirit of radical empathy.
Yeah.
That's because we want to do that for others. We can't do that for others if we can't do it for ourselves.
Yep. Radical empathy toward the self.
It's like so important. And I think I want to just tie this back to a little bit about gender, because I feel that this often comes up. And, I've been working on race stuff for pre-Black Lives Matter. And I want to acknowledge gender is a more entrenched caste system because race is recent, right? As an idea, America is 400 years old. So that's where this idea of racism and race as a concept come about. Gender is older, and yet it's a caste system.
Yes, it
But
is.
I want people to understand that there are multiple caste systems in which we as human beings are operating.
Yeah.
Look at my life. I was born in India, moved here when I was fairly young. In India, I was born in a caste system, the dominant caste. And then moving to the US, I'm no longer dominant. Same human being, exact same human being. Nothing changed about me. Yet I went from dominant to middle, closer to subordinate.
Yeah.
Right? And with gender, it's that caste system. To be male is to be dominant. And there's a story around that too. And this actually, maybe it's another teaching that you and I do. The role of the Christian story, creating that caste system. Because the culture that I come from, my ancestors, gender isn't the way it is now. It is very, very entrenched now. But who were we colonized by? Why were we colonized?
Yeah.
Why was India and the subcontinent colonized? Why was the entire world colonized? Because it was the European Christians who basically thought anyone who doesn't, worship the way they do, their idea of Christianity is a heathen, is a savage. Women used to walk around without tops. It was a way of being ennobled. And yet it was the Victorian ethic, a certain version of Christianity. There were more Christians in India than they were in Europe. The oldest Christian congregation in India started in 4th century in Kerala. So this is where we're talking. We have to break these walls of separation. And this goes to this other question that I think a lot of people have around this is basically we've created these caste systems in our mind. And how do we support white people, the dominant caste people, who have been raised with this idea of being better than, who have been conditioned in a very unconscious way. It's autonomically in their bodies. And Isabel shows us in her book.
That's right.
And you are married to a white person. Yeah, would love for, and you've worked on anti-racist stuff for so long.
Right.
How do we bring that radical empathy and humbling of our dominant caste siblings?
I've been really inspired by my conversations with Ruby on this, Anu. And of course, also just my love relationship with John. I really believe that we need to make space for people to fail. I mean, I think this kind of goes back to a truth as well. To be able to say, in truth, you are not superior to me. In truth, this caste is a lie. In truth, all of us are awesomely and wonderfully made in God's image, I would say, or in the light of the universe, right? You might say. But there has to be space for failure, is what's in my mind. That grace means you get to have a stupid question. Grace means you get to be honest to say, I don't know how to undo this. I don't know how to hack this. I'm frightened of this. Um, we have to create little pockets of resistance where people can have candid conversations and be in relationship to each other. John and I fell in love anew working on race work when we were just colleagues, telling candid, straight, open, heart-ripping, true stories to each other. And
Yeah.
stories break something down, right? And stories take us way down into the place where we have commonality,
Mm.
where we find at the bedrock, to be particular, John and I have the same mom and dad in a way. Though we have totally different backgrounds, the dynamics between our parents was so similar. We could be siblings. The energy between the parents, the sometimes tension, the sometimes anger, right? Sometimes some substance issues in there. That when I listen to John talk about his life, his story, he's not just the white man. He's John Albert,
He's John Albert.
right?
That's
He's
that identity, that box, that caste dehumanizes who he is as a human being.
Exactly. And he doesn't get to be, and this happens, we're white and black, and so things happen. But when I'm careful, he's not all the categories. And
Yeah.
he saves me from the categories because he's John. He's Flossie's boy, you know,
Yeah.
Philadelphia raised, right? He likes that sports team,
Right.
he makes great apple pie. He becomes a person and not a concept. He's a human and not a category. And I think that's the work. I think it's the work for all of us. What do you think?
No, I think you're right on. And I think that's basically the big, for me, this work took me down a very dark path mentally and emotionally as a BIPOC person, as a person of color, as an immigrant in this country. I was always pretending to be as close as possible to being white.
Mm,
Changed my name to Andy for a very long time, pretended not to speak any Indian languages, even though I speak two and read and write them very well, and wanted to dissociate myself and create a public persona that didn't associate me with being an other.
mm.
Emotionally, that took such a huge toll on me. And it was, to the point where I almost took my life. But the big gift, again, this is where the sacred comes in for me, is what would my life be if I stopped living in ideas that others have about myself,
Right.
but in ideas that I have about myself, right? And then
That's
what would all of us look like? What would our world look like if we stopped living in ideas of each other, but in the ideas, in the ideas of each other, but in the presence of one another?
I love the way you say that. Your TED Talk, which everybody should watch.
So like, I think for me, like, that's exactly the work. Like the two of you have really been able to model that on the one hand, we work in this relative reality
Yes.
of this caste system, of brokenness, of injustice and disparities.
Mhm.
And yet, when you're together, you're living from that absolute reality of being the children of God,
Yeah.
of being,
Which is truth.
which
Come
is
back to truth. I mean, the truth is when John's heart is beating and I sit near him, it slows mine down. Like that's the truth.
yeah,
Truth is my favorite spot in the world is, you know, on a cushion in front of him watching a movie.
yeah,
But the world and the culture and all of that other stuff is also that John became white, like you became Indian, like
yeah,
you became, and like I became black. The world races us, the world cultures us.
exactly.
You and I know that though those categories are constructed, the pain in them is true. The
Yeah,
pain is real. So the way we get out of that box, out of the package, somebody put in the chat, I think is with absolute vulnerability
mm,
and showing ourselves to each other. Do you guys remember that science fiction movie where there's like the aliens came down, and one of them was Raquel Welch's daughter, and they had skin, flesh on, but when they took the flesh off, they were just light. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I totally do.
Right? They were just light. I've
Yeah.
never forgotten that because I feel like inside we
Yeah.
really are light. I'm looking at Ali Palmer's face. So we really are light.
Indeed.
And in a package.
Right. I think someone just asked, I want to respond to this, and I'd love for you to share something. So how does I want to read this properly because this is an important question. Grace G asked, where does systemic racism work fit into fierce revolutionary love? And I think for me, it is directly connected. There is no other way, because when we're talking about systemic racism is a result.
Yes.
It's a result of this delusion of this caste system. It
Yeah.
is a result of many, many people coming together to enslave Black people because of the story of Ham. It's many, many people coming together to kill Native Americans and put them on reservations, give them no resources because of this caste system, that they are not worthy. So where does revolutionary love come in? If those same people, those people that are making decisions, saw all human beings as their siblings, saw the fundamental light in all of them, they would make policy, dictate policies, day to day, whether it's in their organizations, whether it's in their nonprofits, whether it's in philanthropy, rooted in wanting to benefit everybody and not just a select few.
That's right. And I would say, Anu, the fierce revolutionary love in my practices where I talk about that living justly. It is because we are love warriors. It is because we are fierce lovers that we will not let our brother and our sister be oppressed without speaking up.
Yeah.
We can't live in love is not a bubble. Love is not like cutesy, warm and fuzzy. I'm talking about lay down your life kind of love. I'm talking about march in the streets kind of love, get arrested kind of love. I'm not talking about violence, but I am talking about the unequivocal, I will stand up for your right to be, is what love is. It is fierce like that. And I think it's the only thing that's going to free us. Fierce love is confrontational.
Yeah.
Fierce love will call out the injustice when it is encountered and will make strategies to defeat it. Love is not nammy-pammy, wussy, codependent. Did I say wussy?
Right.
But what James Baldwin says this. I'm gonna butcher it, but he says, "Love doesn't turn out to be what we thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Love is a battle. Love is a growing up.
Yeah.
Growing up. Love is tough."
I think so. And I think that's what Dr. King talked about too, right? Love by itself is anemic and sentimental.
Correct. That's right.
Requires that power force. And I think for me, this is why I think becoming and embodying being anti-racist is so important. It is the beginning of the journey.
Yeah.
Ibram Kendi talks about moving from non-racist to anti-racist, but that's still the beginning of the journey because we're still being anti something. We're still fighting. So we're giving energy to something that we don't want, which sometimes actually creates that even more. But we need that fuel, that fire, that anger, that righteousness to begin to help us really seek answers. I know that was true for me.
Yeah, I think
moving from being anti-racist to now we need to break it, change it, transform it.
And before the liberation of all people.
Exactly.
Before the dismantling of caste.
Exactly.
And when we say that, even as a Black woman, when I say I want to dismantle caste, what I'm saying is something crazy because I benefit from caste. I do.
How?
Oh my Lord, don't make me make the list, right? But my educated, 99-degree Christian, articulate self, I have so much access to, not access like a white straight man, but I have access to power. Right. I don't. If I don't tell the truth, I can't get liberated. Right?
I love what you're saying because this is where I think a lot of us need to do our work. And I hope everyone here is humbled by what Jacqui just admitted around how certain castes of our mind benefits her, because oftentimes, particularly white folks, go into victimization. When we talk about them being dominant caste on this one caste system, Like, well, I don't have money. I grew up poor. Like, yes, all those things are true.
Because you pass
And
with it every day though, because you are.
exactly. Yeah, but the experience that the bird watcher had at Central Park, or the 14-year-old kid had at Arla Hotel, or Breonna Taylor or Ahmaud Arbery. So this is where we have to begin to talk about intersectionality and positionality.
That's right. That's really well said, love. And we have more than one identity, right? We have more than one origin story, more than one story that I like to think about, and the places where those stories overlap. And so I grew up Black and poor, but I'm not poor right now. I'm okay. I have access to government agencies. I have access to people who make decisions, right? I have access to, um, I have an audience, is what I'm trying to get at,
Right.
which gives me a lot of power. And I have to be honest about that so that I hold it and use it responsibly.
Yeah. So I think there's a kind of a really fun conversation happening in the chat around someone asked, so do we become a colorblind society?
No, no. Sorry, no.
Can you elaborate a little bit on
No.
what we mean by revolutionary love and building a beloved community?
Please don't do that, guys. There's, first of all, you don't see Anu and his particularity. My favorite definition of love is the non-possessive delight in the unique particularity of the other. That's
Oh,
right.
say that again. Oh,
The non-possessive delight
non-possessive delight,
in the unique particularity of the other.
the unique particularity of the other.
Right. So if I'm sitting around with Anu, having a talk and thinking about da 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 da, and I don't see that he's different than I am, if I don't honor his experience, his wisdom, his life, his ups, his downs, I am disregarding his gift and his power. I'm disregarding that he's light. Don't, when I was a little girl, I had this white friend tell me, "You're so not like the rest of the Black kids. You talk so proper. And sometimes I forget you're Black." I'm like, don't forget I'm Black. I am Black and proud of being Black.
Exactly.
See me is to see my Blackness and my story, and all the people, as Valerie would say, who stand behind me, all of my ancestors who came before me. Colorblind is there's no truth in colorblind.
Yeah.
And I say the truth will set us free. You do see color. You make associations to color every single day. How many times a day? How many times a day do we see color and make associations? So let's not be dishonest and say we don't see it.
It's so true. And like, scientists have shown that we have at least 50,000 thoughts a day.
Yes,
50,000.
50,000 thoughts a day.
That's like basically our body and our minds just making associations left and right and with color.
Right.
And I think part of our job in dismantling all forms of caste systems, across the world, right? But really starting here, because we are, as Americans, privileged. We are, and we have to really remember that.
Yes.
And I think part of it is that other countries still look up to us. If we can really dismantle this here,
yes,
begin to really model this for countries like India with 1.3 billion people, majority of them, really in this ancient, destructive caste system. But I think part of, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts, and I think we should go to some other folks asking us questions now, is I feel the root of dismantling caste system is dismantling whiteness.
Yeah.
As long as we have a dominant caste, all of us are trying to get into that caste. That's the in group. We want to be part of that. Because for me, a lot of scholars have been talking about this, particularly legal scholars, that in 10 years, 15 years, people like me will be white unless we do something about it. Asian Americans, Indian Americans, Middle Easterns, and we already begin to see that, So how do we undo whiteness?
You used to be white.
Yeah.
I mean, on the census forms.
Exactly.
Where Asian folks were white. Say the thing that Elizabeth Wilkerson says about, I don't want to get it wrong, about caste being and race being the bones, the skin.
Yeah. So caste is the bones, race is the skin.
Right.
And class is the diction, the education. But if we can talk our way out of something, right, it's class. If we can't, it's caste.
And I just wanted my African American BIPOC people to know that a Black woman wrote that book, and she's not trying to say there isn't racism. She's not saying that. That's not her argument at all. I think her work is to say there is this thing called caste that is in operation across the globe,
Mm-hmm.
and that there are pieces of it that are about skin tone,
Right.
and pieces of it about where we've been slotted.
Right.
And that's just to remind our American context, you know that race was created to slot us.
Mm,
Race was created to slot the Black indentured servants in
exactly.
the place where they were permanently on the bottom, where they could not pass, where their color kept them in bondage,
Right.
kept them poor, and
Mm,
kept them disenfranchised. So
yeah.
I just don't want people to get caught in the language and not stay with the.
I agree. And I want to actually bring in Genesis brings up an interesting point where she says, I respectfully disagree. If it wasn't whiteness, another dominant group would claim the spot. It's the start, but not the remedy. And my response quickly to is that, yes, maybe, maybe. But let not the fear of what may happen in the future prevent us from taking action today.
Yeah.
Because we're afraid of another dominant group, we're not going to undo this caste system. No, we got to do it. And then we got to then address what the remedies are to prevent people from building caste systems altogether.
And I would say, listen to what Genesis is saying. I'd love to, Genesis, come jump in with us sometime soon. I would say, I put whiteness in quotes like that.
Yeah.
Because it is true that you could be in you could be in an African context where there are two tribes or two ethnic groups, and one of them has decided to use the story of Ham to obliterate the other, right? And without whiteness, there can still be that oppression. I think that's right.
Mhm.
So when I say whiteness, I'm putting it in quotes to say it is true, though, that the Japheth people, the white folk,
Mhm.
over time across continents have have managed to be able to oppress
Mhm.
people of color in unprecedented ways. How do we hold the truth in something about whiteness that has been uniquely destructive?
Yeah.
White capitalist, like all of the things that Genesis is writing. But I'm
Right.
just trying to say whiteness, maleness, straightness, dominant culture, capitalism, all of that swirl up. I like to call that white, in quotes,
Yeah.
whiteness.
Well, it's basically kind of going back to the way I'm receiving this inquiry that you're making, Jackie, is it goes to the pathway that you're talking about. What whiteness has done, it's taken us away as human beings, regardless of what we look like, away from loving ourselves unconditionally,
Yes.
loving our posses unconditionally, and loving our world unconditionally. Because to become white, one has to give up something. One
That's
has to give up one's connection to tradition, to rituals, to language, to a way of being, to ancestors, to land,
ethnicity.
and ethnicity, and I forget her name, there's a beautiful Swiss American psychologist from Wisconsin, and there's a wonderful conversation that she had with Krista Tippett on the On Being podcast, and her mother or her grandmother was Swiss, and they immigrated to the US in the 1930s, and she never learned English. And the whole time she was in Wisconsin, all she was basically in a state of depression because she missed the Swiss mountains where she was from.
I saw that. Yeah, that's right.
And that is the malaise of whiteness. It
Yes.
blights not just people of color who have been excluded from this idea, but it's all of us human beings. And then it prevents us from being collected to one another, right? We
Including
can't, including white people themselves. Well,
like
I'm better than you because I have blonde hair versus I have brunette hair. You're a little bit olive skin, and we're creating again castes of minds. So we can't be in the presence of one another, but just in these made up ideas, these stories.
that's right. I agree with that, and I think it's been it. There is a place. I mean, I put my psych hat on. I say there's a disembodied something about that,
Yeah,
a soulless something about that, where in order to pass for white,
yeah,
Lithuanians let go of being Lithuanian, Germans let go of being German, and and we constructed that here. That's a unique. That is, no matter what else has happened around the globe, and it has, there
mm,
is a unique United States of America context that is real about
Yeah.
child slavery,
Right.
that is real about, um, yeah, that really built this nation,
Right.
lies of the inferiority of Black people.
Yeah.
Those lies are coaxed out of Jefferson's writings, right? Those lies are read into the Bible. I mean,
Right.
if there's something that we can't pretend didn't happen here,
Yeah.
it didn't happen in the same way in other places around the globe.
And it was, I mean, I think Jeffrey asks this question, can he talk about the costs of these caste disparities, these racial disparities? And I'll just say one comment is a 2012 study that the Kellogg Foundation did. This is 8 years ago, where they looked at areas across, life outcomes, health, education, criminal justice. Um, the US economy would save $1 trillion, $1 trillion without racial disparities in our country.
Yeah.
And not only that, we would make $1 additional trillion.
Wow.
So the cost of this thing is $2 trillion annually.
Holy cow.
Annually.
Yeah.
So for those of us who are not convinced by the moral arguments and they're super in their capitalist hat,
Yeah.
it's like, yo, y'all want to make money? Let's get rid of bias. Let's get rid of caste.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Someone is saying something anew in the chat about, oh, we have to find a way to love the Trump insurrectionists. Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Educate me here.
what, when I'm talking about fierce love, I am saying love that extends past our friends, our posse, past the stranger, even to our enemy. I love that Genesis is laughing at that. But what's love got to do with that? Love does not mean pretending like what they did is right.
Yes.
That's not the same thing. Love is not acting like violence is right. It is not. In fact, when you love your children, you tell them the truth about what right and wrong is.
Yeah.
When you love your children, you model for them what love looks like. When you love your friend, you don't let your friend continue to behave in ways that are injurious to you or them and call that love. So why would we pretend that love is supposed to somehow act like that behavior was acceptable on any level? It was not.
It was not.
Franchise, yes. Feel disappointed, yes. Don't like the election, protest. Sure, use your First Amendment rights to do that. But that horrific display of hang Pence.
Yeah. There was a noose. There was a noose outside the Capitol.
And this is the hard thing to say, guys. You're gonna buy my book and you're gonna see me write this. You don't get to like fake out with your mom and dad.
Yeah.
Your circle of friends, your posse.
Right.
You're not gonna fake it out to yourself. That's
right.
How you start with truth. If you can tell yourself, Uncle Bob is a racist,
right,
a white supremacist, and his behavior goes against my values,
right,
then you can't be a revolutionary. If you can't tell yourself, yesterday when I behaved that way, that actually goes against my values. And I can't be, so, and you can't tell your parents, your Auntie Beverly,
yeah,
when you stand in the room with those guys and bless that,
yeah,
you're not behaving in a loving way.
Yeah.
Who gets to tell the truth?
And this is, I think, I want to just quickly respond to this and have two questions that we should answer. One Amanda's sending me, which is really great. I think for me, when I saw the insurrectionists, and this is how I started the work. 10 years ago, I took a class with Paul Vinzio on transitional justice, watched hours and hours of footage of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa.
Right.
They reckoned with the atrocities and the horrificness of apartheid, which was only from 1948 onwards.
Yes.
Right? It was a short period of time. We've had, 246 years of, enslavement.
And why do you think that is that we can't reconcile? Why can't we tell the truth so the truth can make us free?
I think because this is going back to the first pillar of the pathway you've laid out. We don't love ourselves unconditionally. When I saw those insurrectionists and when I listened to them, I basically see in them, in their veins, the violence, ancestral violence that they not only experienced on their bodies, but also their ancestors did, and they perpetuated on others. Think about the slave hunters. Think about the people who killed, You know, one of my friends who's an indigenous person said the reason why indigenous people were called reds, because there's no skin color as red, was because they were skinned off.
Right. And
So
they,
the violence was literally built into the veins and bones. And as we move towards a more peaceful transition, that violence still needs to manifest itself unless it's healed, unless it's atoned.
I think that's right. I think we get out of the place of violence by confessing its stranglehold on us. I think we
Mhm.
get out of the place of violence by having other ways to express ourselves.
Yeah,
Truth, reconciliation, reparations. Yes,
yes,
and the truth has to start with our, with our own junk. I mean,
exactly. It, in every tradition, we have confession. And then a lot of us who are secular go to a therapist. Why do we do that?
so we can
Be truthful.
interrogate our texts and tell the truth on
Exactly.
ourselves. Yes.
Exactly. So there's two questions. I think I can answer.
That's good, Genesis. I'm sorry.
Sorry, one question I can answer, and then one I'd like to ask you, Jacqui, is please distinguish between race and ethnicity. Both are determined by skin color and other physical attributes. Yes and no. So race, everyone, is a metric of a caste system, right? The caste system that basically ranks people on graded human value based on how they look in our country. There are different caste systems. Race is one type of caste system, and this is the one that we have in the US. Ethnicity does not have to do with physical attributes. Again, we're looking from the lens of race again, because you can be Italian ethnicity, but be very dark skinned, and be Italian and be very light skinned. You can be Punjabi, which is what my family is, and my mother is very dark skinned, my dad is lighter skinned, right? So it's not how we look, it's basically belonging to a set of cultural traditions, language, religion, spirituality, you name it. That's what ethnicity is. We can think of Koreans or Chinese or even African Americans. Being African American is now an ethnicity, not a race, because African Americans are people who are descendants of enslaved people who created a unique culture indigenous to the United States. But you could be Jamaican American, you, you look black on the caste system, but you're ethnically Jamaican. So I'll just end there. The question that someone asked that was really interesting, and Jacqui, I'm curious because you've done so many of this, is why is it that most participants we had at some point like almost 400 people here are women?
My flip answer or a good answer? I think I think feminine energy
Mm,
is really looking for a way to birth a new worldview, a new culture.
I agree.
I'm not saying that men don't have feminine energy. I think that many men do have feminine energy,
I do.
right? Yeah.
And I acknowledge it.
Right. But that anima, that is feminine energy, that is merciful, womb-like, that is trying to think about a new way through, is curious. And I think we're seeing that in movement building, in leading and teaching,
Yeah.
writing. I think that's what it is. I think it's a gift and a phenomenon about what women are feeling called to do right now. How
I
would you agree with that?
I totally agree with it. You know, if you haven't read, in addition to Caste, I would, and of course your upcoming book, Jacqui, I would encourage people to read A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. And in that book, he talks about how oftentimes people that acknowledge the feminine in them are the vanguards of change,
Yeah.
because it is that feminine energy that's been suppressed in all of us. This need, this desire to dominate, whether it's to dominate people because of their physical attributes or women themselves, um, is something that we have to overcome. And for me as a man, you know, I have had to do a lot of work, Jacqui.
Hmm.
Years and years of embodied practice, somatic practices, mindfulness practices, therapy, to overcome the shame of what it mean, what I would be presented as, perceived as, if I talked about things the way I talk about. And it's so visceral, Jacqui. I can't even describe it. I was like numb. And that's how we have conditioned our men, our boys in our society. So I mean, this is definitely another teach-in that you and I can do around gender, but I think you're right on.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I can't really read the chat as fast as I want to see what people are saying there, but I think unless I want to back on. But I think it's also, I mean, I was looking at some analytics the other day, and I have so many more female followers than male followers because I'm a woman, I think also, right? I think when the men stand up and teach more of these classes, then I think more men will also come. I think that's just a way of the world of what we feel comfortable with and where we get our coaching and where we look for mentors. I think that's possible that men are more
Yeah.
comfortable learning from men. What else am I seeing in there?
Lots of unconscious bias there.
Check your text too, Jacqui. There's a lot of good ones in your text.
Okay, thank you, love.
So I think we're also like about 10 minutes out. So I would love to take a few more questions and then give you all some next steps as well.
Yeah.
And
What about this one? Is it possible to dismantle caste in your lifetime?
Is it possible to dismantle caste in my lifetime? In my lifetime? In our lifetime? I think it's possible to get a start. I think the awareness of caste and race and class is the beginning of the end of it.
yeah,
That's what I think. I think that we need to have some grace with ourselves about what it looks like to begin to dismantle.
yeah,
You put a little chink in the what is that thing? Armor.
armor.
Maybe I want to use a different metaphor. Maybe I want to say you have a house that is built poorly. Thinking about Isabel Wilkerson. And there's a flood and it gets wet and because it's wet, it's not as secure and it's shakier. Maybe we flood the house that is poorly built around caste and racism and white supremacy and gender injustice. Maybe if we flood that house,
Yeah,
revolutionary love at the foundation. And that means what we're teaching our children. That means what we're reading. That means what we're sharing. That means
yeah,
the art we put in the world. And
yeah,
maybe we weaken the foundation because we flood it with love.
yeah. I am very optimistic about this. I am kind of an eternal optimist, and I believe we can dismantle this caste system within our lifetime. And I think about it as a millennial, as someone who has changed how quickly our society has transformed just in 15 years. Just the nature of Facebook, the nature of exploration of Mars, the nature of Twitter. We have connected the entire world in this time. Artificial intelligence that can measure our heartbeat on our wrists. So if we can do all this, why can't we do caste? That's the question I pose. And this is where I feel mindfulness and knowledge is so important, because we can do what we put our hearts and minds to. If we want to build this beloved community, if we want to live in a world without caste, we can do it. Because if we can put someone on Mars, in 15, 20 years, why can't we get rid of this caste system?
We have to decide if we're going to do it, that
Exactly.
we're willing to let go of what it gives to us.
Yes.
That's the place, right?
We gain.
What we gain from it.
We gain. It's like we always think about what we're going to let go. Yes. And when we let that go, just the sense of ease, all that fear, all that hatred, all that vitriol. Could you imagine living without that?
I can. I also think, Amanda, can you put in the chat, people who are still asking about ethnicity and race and stuff, what's the organization that we get our definitions from? The
Racial Equity Institute.
Racial Equity Institute, yeah. Just so folks can track that. Thank you, Amanda. What I think new is when we rewire our cultures,
Yeah.
we let go of caste, there'll be so much joy, there'll be so much celebration, and I think there'll be grief. Now, this is truth I'm trying to tell. Like when people try to make socialism such a bad word,
Right.
well, what we're really talking about is just sharing money differently, just sharing wealth differently. Why is there so much anger? Why is there so much rage? Because the anger and the rage is a part of the grief. And the grief is I won't have what I used to have, or I won't be able to claim what I used to claim, or I won't still deserve what I used to deserve.
Yeah.
I have to, I'm letting something go to get something better. But I
Mhm.
think that letting go can be difficult for humankind.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be, right? Like, I think that's where we have to trust.
Mhm.
You know, what does trust mean? Confidence, faith, these are all synonyms, right? We have to have trust in ourselves and in one another. And, I imagine that, because I basically came of age around this work in New Orleans, and it's probably, it is my second favorite place in the world, New York being one, of course. Um, we can grieve and mourn and reconcile, but it doesn't have to be a painful process. Of course, there are going to be tears and hugs, but it could be like a second line parade.
Right.
Funerals
That's
in
good.
New Orleans
I like that.
celebrate the death with
That's right.
brass bands and dancing. We can do that
Yep.
if we put our moral imaginations to do that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And when you say that, it makes me think about our colleague Valerie, and the idea of like, I really do think that we are in a birth pain moment. And I
Yes.
think death throes and birth pains are so close together, it's hard to tell the difference.
Yeah.
Um, but something is dying, it is dying.
It is dying. We're moving into a new
It
nation.
was being born. Yeah. Love.
Yeah. Paradigm shift, as Gail says. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, Jacqui, I think we're almost at the end. What are some next steps from you that people can take? And then I'll share some from mine and would
Well,
love to close us out.
the first next step I want you to take, everybody, is to register for the Revolutionary Love Conference, which is April 15 to 18, 2021. It will be our 15th conference. And if you go to revolutionaryloveconference.com, you can see the amazing broad base of leaders that we have coming, because we do multi all the things. It's going to be badass. We'll be in the first 100 days of the election, and the conference is about the courage to imagine a better world, a world without caste, a world without class, a world without racism, a world where men are free to show all their feminine energy. Don't miss it. And
Gonna-
on Saturday night, there's going to be an amazing concert that you don't know about yet, but I know it's coming down the alley. It's going to be some art, some music. It's going to be jamming. So that's revolutionaryloveconference.com. And we made the price very affordable this year, so you all will come. But there'll be an opportunity also for you to give to the Middle Rising Fund. So, we're trying to rise from the ashes, and we'd love to have your support.
Can you talk a little bit about Middle Rising and why we're raising for Middle Rising?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Anu. I mean, our building burned down, everybody. And somebody wrote me, "Do you have insurance?" I'm like, child, that insurance is a porch in the East Village, okay? So we need more than a porch.
Yeah.
We probably need twice what the insurance is to build. And we want to build a community center at our spot. We want to make sure that what we've had is even better so the neighborhood can come, do art, do justice, do organizing, bring your children, get our after school program going, get
Yeah.
the freedom school going. So if we don't have to worry about rebuilding and reconstructing, we can
Yeah.
keep on doing revolutionary love in the world. So that's it. Revolutionary Love Conference and Middle Church, middlechurch.org/rising to help fund us getting back into the deal.
That's great. I think for me is like I would love for people to just continue this conversation with me. You can, follow me on all the social stuff at Be More with Anu or on Instagram at Mindful Anu. I also teach meditation on the side. So would love for you to just be in this conversation with me. And the second aspect is basically this is the core of my work, helping people rewire their brains so we can change habits and really build this beloved community. And in 2 weeks, we will be launching our 5-week course called Breaking Racial Bias, where you'll learn the ins and outs of everything that we just talked about, the who, what, where, when, and why, and how of how this racial caste system was structured, and then how to break it, how
Love.
to do it institutionally, internally, interpersonally, and then be part of a community. And of course, there will be people from Middle that will be in the course, as well as lots of people from across the country, doctors, lawyers, therapists, teachers, and would love for you all to register.
For example, in Anu's class.
Yay. So I will share the link in the thing. It's basically bit.ly break racial bias. And you can write to us if you'd like more than one person to register together. We are offering some scholarships, so we can certainly look into that as well. So
And our next race lab is the conference in April. So that's 2 months from And I really would like you to come to that conversation with us. And can I say already that the book will be pre-orderable at the April conference? Fierce Love.
Love.
Fierce Love. How
Thank you.
to have a better life and a better world through love.
Can you close us out with a meditation?
I can. Guys, if you feel comfortable keeping your eyes open, that's how I sit because I'm antsy and an expert. So if you can, if you can imagine having your eyes open for just a moment and like picking a couple of faces to focus on. Pick a couple faces to focus on. I'm making myself a gallery view. Hello, Jocelyn and Chuck. Hi, Barbara. Hi, Deb. Oh, you guys, see what happens? Oh, hi there. Pick a couple of faces to look on. Hey, Leslie. Hi, Madeline. Hello, Madeline, Madeline's girlfriend. I see you. I see you. And in the spirit of Ubuntu, because I see you, you and I exist. I see your unique physiognomy. That's what Anu and I are talking about. Our physiognomy is not our ethnicity, but I see your cheekbones, Sandy. I see your beautiful hair, Linda. Marian, I see your tender face. Taquina's afro, and right? Our physiognomy is what we present to the world. And the world makes decisions about us based on what it sees. Right, Renee? Our hair, our freckles, our grays. Right, Lynn Pentecost? Right? And what we want to be able to do in this moment, as you look at someone else's face, I want you to imagine how every laugh line, how every wrinkle or freckle or mole, their roots that are growing out because they're in a time of COVID, the weight they gained or the weight they lost, every single thing that they present to you is a representation of how they feel about themselves, how they story themselves, which is to say, how they love themselves. They wake up in the morning and they brush those teeth and floss those teeth and put moisturizer on that face. They coif that hair. They choose those spectacles, those glasses today, or they put their contacts in. They put on purple or red or green or tan or something from their ethnic background, something little Scotch, yes. Some t-shirt that says East Village, serious, yes. They are costumed, amen, to tell you who they are, what matters to them, who they love. They've got a ring on or a piece of jewelry or something that's from a mama or a titi or a child, or right? They're showing you in this Zoom box something that matters to them. And they are gorgeous, beautiful, brilliant, skin holding light, married to their partner, hanging with their friends, playing with their pets, teasing you with the background they made, showing you something about the wonderfulness that is them and their imagination for what the world can be. So in every moment, in every Zoom, from here until we're back in person, study the face, study the eyes, delight in the smile, notice the frown, pay attention to the signal that they're giving you about who they are, and love it. Love their flesh. Love their heart. Love their hands. Love their eyes. Love their red lip. Love their nude one. Love their shaved beard. Love their leather jacket. Love them. Love their flesh. Because they are flesh of your flesh. They are bone of your bone. Because we are kin. Every single one of us. We are kin together. People together, Anthony. People together. Let's make some cacophonous noise now. Take two faces, look at a couple of faces, and let's just say their names. Like, let's just say the names for just a minute, okay? Say, I see you, Renee, okay? Let it be chaotic, because you know how Zoom is. I see you, Stephanie. Come on.
I see you, Penny Hooper.
I don't think they can unmute.
Nancy.
I see you.
I see you, Sandrine. Kevin.
I see you, Anthony.
See you,
Anthony. Sandrine.
Deborah.
I see you, Leslie, in New York City.
See you, Jeannie.
See you, Elizabeth.
See you, Christine.
Leslie. See you, Jess. Danita. See you, Deborah. See you, Glenn. See you, Gozi.
Mary.
See you, Gloria. See you, Paul.
See you, Heather.
There's John Wild. Hello, John.
Jocelyn. See you, Elaine.
You, Naomi.
See you, Tova. I see you, Deborah. See you, Ayana. Deanne.
Jocelyn. I see you, Jean.
Danita.
See you, Taquina.
Christine.
You,
Deborah.
Margaret.
See you, Joycelyn.
See you, Dale.
See you, Kevin.
Elizabeth.
Donald. See you, Julie. I see Laurel and Mel. See you, Penny. Herb.
I see you, Judith.
See you,
Saw you,
Penny.
Angie.
Barb.
Jackie.
See you, Linda.
I see you, Heather.
See you, Jocelyn.
Amanda.
See you,